Hello and welcome to Finding Your Way. Your host today is Randall Adcock, President and Chief Innovation Officer of Wayfinders Business Co-operative. Wayfinders is a community that supports small business owners and other managers with practical tools, shared intelligence, and trusted relationships. Through our Finding Your Way series, we bring experienced guests to help you navigate real-world business challenges with clarity and confidence. Our focus is simple: stronger decisions, stronger businesses, stronger communities. Thanks for joining us. Let's begin.
Okay, welcome to today's Finding Your Way. Today we're pleased to have David Boroditsky present on AI and small business. And I'll just very quickly say David has been in the software business for more than 40 years. His own company now in its 31st year. But I'm just wondering if we could actually have a bit of a round table introduction so that David know who he's talking to. And from my camera, let's start with Jane. You want to briefly your name, your company name, and a line of work that you're in?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jane and I'm in Edmonton, and I am a relationship coach for anybody who's struggling with their relationships, whether it's personal or in the workplace or maybe with yourself even. So that's what I do, and I can't remember what else you asked us to talk about, Randall.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. Lloyd, how about you next?
Lloyd Kenny. I'm in St. Albert. My business is Callcraft Consulting, helping small business with performance management. I also market Legal Shield and ID Shield, and the biggest involvement there with David's work is ID Shield, and I am doing 2 seminars next Wednesday on the topic, and one of the pieces that I'm just getting more information is what's happening in the world of agriculture and cybersecurity. So got some information from one of the ladies at our meeting yesterday, and so we're providing that as well next week.
Very good. Thank you, Lloyd. How about Angela? Next.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Randall. I do not run a small business. I work with the provincial government, but I'm very, very curious about small businesses. And there is a small business in the city center, which is an African business, and I'm trying to help them grow or even sustain themselves. So I'm attending to learn and to learn some more.
Excellent. Thank you. Kevin? Kevin, are you there?
I am.
Okay. Just introduce yourself, name, company, and line of work you're in.
Kevin McNulty. My company is the Canadian Institute for International Trade, which sounds rather pretentious, but I actually our main colleague, the expert in international trade, unfortunately just passed away 2 weeks ago. So my focus is on instructional design and building learning and training projects. So I do some work in that world.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Sabina, are you able to introduce yourself at this time?
Good afternoon, Sabina Postangievsky. I also have my own incorporated company, Bodacious Excellence, and I focus on IT management consulting and roles such as a fractional CIO, Chief Information Officer, after 40 plus years in the industry, of which 20 or so were in federal and provincial executive roles.
Thank you, Sabina. Katrina, are you there, and can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Katrina Ingram. I run a company called Ethically Aligned AI, and I focus on responsible AI. So I do a lot of work in the space of AI literacy, and I also do some advisory work as well.
Thank you. I think that we've covered everyone who's here live. Others in attendance are note takers. Now, David, it's over to you, my friend. You can introduce yourself and begin when you're ready. This is session is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube later. In the last 15 minutes or so, David will open it up for question and answer. So let me know when we're ready to go on that.
Okay, hi, yes, I'm David Boroditsky. My company is called Array Innovations. We're software developers. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we work with our clients one-on-one to really understand what they need and then build them a system that does the thing that they need it to do. Usually these are in the area of, business process management, workflows, things like that. But today, I'd like to talk about AI and small business. And I thought I'd do things a little bit differently today because what I would like to do is to just kind of show you, don't feel insulted, but how little effort I put into, or how little time actually I spent getting this presentation and slide deck together. So what I have here is the transcript that I had with Claude, and I said, "Hey, I'm giving a presentation, looking for some feedback. I'm gonna talk for maybe 45 minutes in a 1 hour session." And then it says, "Yeah, so right, what's your audience like? Are they business owners?" And I'm saying, "They're small business owners, not very tech savvy, middle-aged, service type businesses." And so then it comes back with, "Okay, you want to keep it practical and simple, and talk about use cases and what AI is good for. What are your goals for the presentation?" you know, I'm sure everybody's already familiar with and is using AI. I always think it'd be sort of nice to give them some tips and things, what AI is good at, what it's not good at, the hype machine, all that stuff. And it comes back with more stuff. And mind you, I'm reading the stuff that it's kicking back, but I'm not really, going into great detail, and I'm not trying to parse it or, correct it so much. And then so it's telling me what it thinks AI is good at, what it thinks AI is not good at. It blows some smoke at me saying, "Oh, the hype machine angle is gold too," right? And tells me what I could talk about. So I say, "That sounds good. Can you prepare a couple of things for me?" "Sure. What do you want?" I'm looking, and so at this point in the conversation, I'm using, dialogue mode where I'm talking and it's talking, right? So that's why it's, I sort of interrupted it there. And I said, "I'm looking for an outline presentation that I can give, looking for a little bit of, I don't know, words that can be used to promote this particular event." Got it. So, and then it tells me that since we're in speaking mode, Claude can't really give me, any actual content back because we're in talking mode. So I say, "Great, just give me some promotional words." Sure, it comes up with, "Join us for an eye-opening conversation about artificial intelligence." And this is pretty much word for word what I sent to Randall, that he put in the session description, what AI can do for you. And like you'll notice here that there's an M dash here, which kind of is a dead giveaway that it's AI. And I thought about getting it to rewrite it without the M dash, but I thought, let's just go with it here. It talks about the marketing buzz and the tools. And then it's like, "How's that feel? You want me to adjust the tone?" And I said, "That's really good." I said, "I guess we should also include a couple of sentences about me, who's the presenter. I'm a founder of a software company that's been around for 30 years. I've been I should say riding the leading edge of technology for 40 years and specialize in helping people understand technology." Perfect. Here's something you can add. Your presenter, David, is the founder, right? Which again, if you read the session description, I pretty much copied and pasted that. I said, "That's really great. Thanks. Good luck with your presentation. Let me know." And then I switched over into text mode, and then I said, "I'm looking to put together a slide deck for the presentation. Can you give me an outline?" And then here's its suggested outline for the 45-minute presentation. An introduction, the current AI landscape, what AI is good for, where AI falls short, practical tips for getting started, and then a Q&A. And it's like, well, that seems pretty reasonable to me. And then I'm like, can you please draft a slide deck for me to use during the presentation? And then it kind of goes off and says, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And I'm loading this tool and loading that tool and analyzing and thinking, and then it says, and at some point it kind of tripped and I had to push the button to say, try it again, which, that was fine. And then, yeah, and then it kind of came up with, some reason why it needed to fix something on slide 7. And it kind of went ahead and did that. And then it, gave me a file, and here's the the overview of the text of what each slide's about, and then it gave me made a file and let me put it in my Google Drive, and here we go. Here's the files. AI in your small business, and it's like these are very competent looking slides, right? I didn't do anything about, what color I want or what style I want or whatever. I mean, they're not going to win any kind of design award, and, they're not necessarily even, very good, but they are very competent, I'd say, and certainly better than I could have done if I'd spent, half an hour or an hour starting from scratch. So, all told, this took, on the order of maybe 10 minutes of my time to put this together, right? Because, I have enough expertise in the area to be able to, talk about these things, just off the cuff because this is kind of stuff that I do. But what I find hard is this groundwork of, pulling together the different ideas and putting them in a sequence and making sure that all the things are there. So anyway, so that was kind of a little peek behind behind the scenes of how I actually made this, and there we go. So now I'm going to go and start the presentation for real, I guess, now that we've already gone through it all. Okay, so we're going to talk about the current landscape, what AI is good at, where it falls short, and some tips to help you get you started, and then we'll do some questions. So AI right now is, it's already really, really useful, and it's going to places that we don't really necessarily know or understand or even desire, but it is already in a place that is very useful for small businesses. It can legitimately do things that are of value for us. At the same time, we have to be careful because, the hype. AI is, now the greatest thing since sliced bread. And if you think back to, Bitcoin, and you think back to NFTs, and you think back to the dot-com bubble, and, the great tulip bubble of the 18th century, right? Like these things happen all the time. And it just so happens that we're in the early stages of the AI bubble. So there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of promises being made. And it's really hard to separate what's real from what's just marketing. So, what we need to do is get better at being, smart consumers, not just early adopters. And so for me, what this means is really getting used to using these tools as much as possible while they're still free or relatively inexpensive, because at some point they're going to become less affordable. And that's not going to be the time to figure out how to use these tools or how to incorporate them into your business. So we need to do that now so that when it becomes $100 a month or $150 or $200 a month to use these tools, you'll be able to extract that value because you'll already know the things that it can help you with, and you already have got those systems set up for yourself in your business. So what are some of the things that AI is good at? I mean, drafting communications, like making a presentation. Like, again, this presentation took less than half an hour to put together. Summarizing, organizing. So I record all my meetings, all my phone calls, all my Zoom calls. Everything gets recorded, everything gets transcribed, and then those transcriptions and audio files can get imported into the LLM of your choice to be able to say, hey, what are the things that I told Fred that I was going to do by next week? And even if it's not putting things in your calendar for you, at least you've got a summarized list. Tools are now getting more sophisticated where they're trying to manage those things across meetings and across time. But a great way to start is to just, have every meeting, okay, with every client or every project, and just kind of sort them out by, is it a sales meeting? Is it a customer service meeting? Is it a research? Whatever it is, just have them by type and just dump all those files into a place and then say, hey, LLM, these are the things related to this. What do you think? Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what's left to be done. Give me the list of things that, that you think are in order of priority. Marketing. Yeah, I mean, so I spent, 48 seconds making the content for the marketing for this session. It's really good at, you say, I need something for LinkedIn, or I need something for Facebook, or I need something for my blog, or I need some Instagram. It can also make pictures. I mean, making videos is kind of hit and miss, but it's easy to make a photo of, show me a group of 5 people sitting around a table looking at a whiteboard, that kind of stuff. Very easy to do. Oftentimes in your business we'll be dealing with people asking us the same questions over and over again, or the same kind of questions. So it's really easy to sit with your AI buddy and just talk to it. Put it into voice mode and just say, I want to tell you things about my business, or about this part of my business, or how I go about determining what's the best service to offer a client. Don't give me feedback, don't summarize it, just let me talk. And then at the end, you can say, okay, now I'd like you to distill that information into a document that I can email people or put on my website, or put into a PDF that I can email them when they request it. Okay, whether that has to do with, onboarding or customer service or troubleshooting or whatever it is. Scheduling, administration, like these tools are really great at keeping track of things that need to be done, and making a schedule for you and then reminding you of things. The last area, of course, is things like research, which needs to be taken with a grain of salt, or a giant hunk of salt, because LLMs are notoriously not good at telling you facts. They are prone to invent facts that don't exist. So don't use them for facts, without checking, without using another LLM to check this LLMs. So that's what they're really good at, is just kind of being a somewhat literate, somewhat competent, over-eager helper that wants to please you by moving words around for you and coming up with words that it thinks are the right words in response to your words. And they're getting better all the time, and they will actually somewhat adapt themselves to the kinds of ways you interact with it, or the kinds of things that you ask it, and the information that you provide it. And like I said, it's never been as cheap as it is right now, and they've never been as bad or as dumb as they are right now. So this, for me, is the key insight from this is, they're great assistants for repetitive language-based tasks. And one of the things that it took me a while to internalize was that they don't get upset when you say, do it for me again, slightly differently. Okay, good, but now I want you to do it again, but slightly differently. And now I want you to change this little thing and give it to me again and again and again and again. And, if you were asking a person to do the same thing over and over 47 times, slightly differently each time, they would want to stab you, right? But the AI doesn't mind, right? And so for me, it took a while to get over my natural, my natural abhorrence to the idea of asking for something over and over and over again. But that's a habit we need to get out of when we're talking to LLMs, because at this point they don't seem to mind. Okay, where does AI fall short? Yeah, all the things that have to do with human relations, right? So AI, sometimes you'll be surprised. AIs are pretty good at listening to a meeting or a transcription of a meeting and detecting the tone in the room, detecting that someone's testy or upset or frustrated. But don't count on that. Like we've got hundreds of thousands of years of evolution baked into our brains in terms of being able to pick up on subtle cues, both spoken and unspoken. So don't rely on the AI to help you with your client relationships or difficult conversations. When you're making really important decisions, I mean, I think it behooves us to put the big boy and big girl pants on and make those decisions for ourselves. Certainly we can use the LLMs to give us information. We can ask, for their recommendations or their opinions, but at the end of the day, it's up to us. Yeah, confidential information. I mean, these things they hoover up information. That's how they're trained, is they are given all the information that can be acquired. And in essence, the things that you provide to it at some point become input for the next generation of model training. The degree to which they say they won't use that data when you pay them and say don't use my stuff. That's what they say, and maybe they are, but maybe they won't, because the terms of service can always change. So you need to be really careful about the information you put in. So, don't put in personally identifiable information. Don't put in, confidential information that's been provided to you by a client or a third party. Maybe take pains to, remove, that sensitive data from it before you provide it. And then AI is there's big variability in how good AI is, and because of the whole hype thing, people are going to make claims that their AI is good for this, that, or the other thing, when in fact it may not be. And so rather than just kind of falling into the trap of this AI does everything, actually find out what does it purport to do. Right. And yeah. Okay, hype. So as we've probably all noticed, AI, everybody is sprinkling AI onto every product or service that they offer. The other day, there's a company called Allbirds that makes waterproof shoes, and that's been their business, and they're a publicly traded company. And they announced 2 days ago that they are pivoting into AI data centers, that they have sold off their shoemaking intellectual property, and they're going to be building AI data centers on a small scale that they're going to be renting out to businesses to use. So that is, That's a very hilarious kind of pivot in my perspective. So, that's an extreme example of people adding AI to things. I guess they're getting out of the shoe business though. So, everybody's feeling like, there's suddenly this race, and if you're not in front, then you're behind. But the reality is not everything needs AI. Um, and then we also have, the media coverage, right? Like, we're constantly being bombarded with, AI will be the ruin of everything, or AI will destroy the environment, or AI will, is taking away every job. Um, and you know what? It's not as good. It's not going to be as good as, the proponents are saying, but it's not going to be as bad as the doomsayers are saying. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think back to, back in the days when cars were the newfangled thing, right? They were brittle and they were expensive and they were noisy and they were just a pain in the ass for everybody. And what's wrong with horses? And and for a while there was like, well, how these things are just a joke. They're never going to catch on. And that was true for a while until all of a sudden it wasn't. Um, one of the big problems, especially in enterprise or larger businesses, is there's intense pressure to adopt AI, and everybody needs to have an AI strategy, and everybody needs to have a VP in charge of machine learning. And I'm sort of reminded of back a few years ago when the company formerly known as Facebook announced that they were all in on the metaverse and they were changing their name to Meta, and that they were betting big that by 2030 everybody would be hanging out in virtual reality, and that analysts were coming up with projections of how many hundreds of billions of dollars of commerce would be happening in the metaverse. And every, Disney was going to be in the metaverse, and people were buying metaverse real estate for millions of dollars. And large companies were appointing, strategic advisors for metaverse strategies. And this is all, it was all hype. It was all fluff. It's all disappeared. And so I think this is similarly going to happen, or is happening, in the world of AI. Lots of businesses are just, adopting AI in ways that don't actually make sense, or that don't actually do what it purports to do. And sometimes it's because the vendors are lying, and sometimes it's because, the business itself isn't organized enough, or its data isn't organized enough to actually be able to make use of these tools. And yeah, and also, before you buy, understand what does it actually do, and can you see it actually doing something for you? So, I would never buy an AI product or service that doesn't come with a free trial. For example, try it out, try it for yourself, and see what it does, and actually try using it. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to ask, it dumb questions. They're very, very patient at explaining how to do things. Okay, so here's some practical tips to get started. So pick something that you do in your business every day. So maybe it's, you go and visit, 3 or 4 different websites or blogs, and you read them all. So maybe you could get somebody to summarize them for you. Okay, so instead of reading them all, you read a summary of them to then be able to go and read the ones that are in more detail if you need it. Or maybe it's, something to do with, you do some prospecting. So every week you take some leads and you follow up with them, or you send them an email, or you check back in with former clients. So a lot of those things can be either get some assistance with actually coming up with the words for those things, or there's actually tools that can you can use with your programs that will actually do some of those things for you and keep track of them. Start with the free things first. And sorry, as an aside, where it says ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, Microsoft Copilot, the draft that Claude made of this slide, it didn't include itself in this list, which I found very interesting, that it didn't include itself on this list. So I had to go in and add it. So again, they've all got free tiers. They're all trying to get you into their, into their cult, into their religion, on their team. I'm currently on Team Claude. I think their models are currently leading. They also seem to be a little bit more upfront from an ethical perspective with respect to actually um, indicating that they are at least aware of some of the ethical challenges and issues that exist around these models and have some concern about them, at least more so than the other ones. Goes without saying, you should always review the output. Always, always, always. Because you never know when it's going to say something completely wrong or backwards or just make something up. So always review the output. If you don't like how it's worded, tell it and ask it to reword it so that it sounds more like you. A lot of models these days will let you upload samples of your own writing that you can say, hey, here's how I write, or here's how I tend to explain these things or describe this, so be inspired by this and try to, replicate this style. Also, again, protect the client data. You don't want to have to go to a client and say, hey, some of your data leaked. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions of the people trying to sell you stuff, because they're trying to sell you something and invest your time and money in them. And, just ask, be comfortable asking questions. What exactly does your thing do? What does it do exactly with my data, right? Can I get my data out? Okay, what happens if I cancel my account? Okay, those are some important things to think about. And yeah, and try to remember that you're the human here. You're the one who's at this point still in charge. So, remember that these are tools for us to use and we're not their tools yet. Okay, I think that seems to be what I've got here. Because I thought maybe there might be a few questions. I don't know.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much, David. That was very informative and practical, giving us a full range of information about the ins and outs of AI. And I think now, if you want to close that out, we will move to question and answer period. I've asked people to come up with some ideas. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or.
How important would it be for when you're using this to any degree and sharing it with others that all of it be done through VPN? So things are encrypted.
Well, VPNs don't really address the encryption issue, because any interactions that you're having through your web browser with any of these sites is already going to be encrypted with an SSL certificate.
Okay.
And I would assume that if you install the OpenAI app or the Claude app or Copilot or Gemini, that they're also using encryption to interact with the back end. Where a VPN would be of value would be if you want to shield from the whoever's network you're using which internet addresses or hosts you're interacting with on the internet. So if you don't want TELUS to know that you're talking to Claude, then if you used a VPN, you could hide that from TELUS. That said, I don't really know what the value is of that, because it's not like you're visiting some, illegal dark web website that, you don't want anyone to know that you're visiting. Right. So, the other way in which VPNs are used is sort of in a corporate environment where, in addition to the security that is obtained through encryption, there is also security to only allow access to certain resources to machines or hosts that are on that company's network. So my company, for example, we have systems that we use internally that can only be accessed through our VPN. Okay, so if I'm on my computer in a cafe, I can connect to those services through our VPN, and don't have to worry about any kind of snooping on the local network or any kind of man in the middle exploits. Right. And my company can sort of be sure that, that we have locked down access. So people from random places around the internet can't try to log in. Right. Can't sort of, so even if they have a username and a password, right, to that system, they still can't get in if they're not on the right network.
All
I'm
right.
preparing myself a little bit for a session next Wednesday when I'm presenting to farmers and ranchers, and in doing some of the research before I put some of the slides together and changed my regular identity theft presentation. This whole thing came up with the value of farm equipment and the things that are done and the transactions that are made using their own laptops and tablets and smartphones.
Okay.
And the risks therein.
All right. That wasn't a question, though, was it, Lloyd?
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
Well, thank you. If you got your question answered, then we'll move on to Jane.
I think Katrina had her hand up first, but
Well, next.
whatever.
No, Jane, you go ahead. I think you were first.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I don't know if this is too random or not, but I was recently involved in a conversation about AI, and the question that this fellow who worked in IT for decades kept saying, what is the cost to having the convenience? Like, what is the cost to us for having the convenience of AI to help us write, to help us think, to help us try and connect with people in some strange way? I don't know. What would your answer be, David?
My answer would be that yes, of course, there's some kind of cost, because there's electricity and there's buildings and there's chips and there's people and there's, all of those things. But, we have, for better or worse, engineered our world and our civilization in a way where we are increasingly tied into and dependent upon those networks and those systems. I mean, we're walking around with these things in our pockets and we're connected to things. And so at this point, it seems difficult to imagine undoing all that in a way that keeps everybody healthy and fed at this point. So I think the responsible thing to do is to use AI as sparingly as you can. Don't just sit around going, I want to make up pictures of purple bunnies jumping over unicorns just for fun, and spend all day just making those machines do those things. Okay, that's an irresponsible use, in my opinion. Okay, so at scale, these things use a lot of power. And I mean, there's a lot of hype about, oh, we're going to build a gigawatt of compute, and all these people talking about all these data centers that are never actually going to get built, right? Because is actually not possible to build all the things that have been announced. Um, but it's also the case that you know, what is the value in, saving people's time and energy? Or what's the value in allowing a small business owner to be able to make a better living by having a better work-life balance because they can spend less time doing something? I mean, that's the promise of all technology, So, back in the 1940s, it was electricity is going to save women from all this housework because they can buy a toaster and, they can buy, a crock pot, and this is going to save time. It didn't save anybody time, but
I just think I was recently being driven around Les Wexner's properties in northeast Columbus. New Albany is the town it was at, and there were miles and miles and miles of buildings that he's built for this data center. And there's such secrecy about it that I think we need to be talking about what the costs are on a regular basis so that it stays top of mind and we can have our eyes open to see it rather than everybody jumping on board. And I just think needs to be part of every discussion about AI. What are the costs?
absolutely, I agree. And unfortunately, our political leaders don't seem to be willing or able to engage in those kinds of, conversations in a meaningful way. I mean, they have, legislatively, they could say, hey, you know what? Electricity used for data centers, there is a surcharge of X number of cents per kilowatt hour that is then going to get diverted into, green energy. They could do that. There's nothing stopping them, but it's unlikely that they would do things like that.
I would add to this that we are living in unprecedented times. This is not just another technology. On personal conversations previously, David, it says software is the greatest invention of all time. But when we have something that is actually competitive with our core value, our own intelligence, we have crossed a threshold into an unknown place. And so while our leaders are stumbling and bumbling about this, I kind of give them a little credit because, well, where do we go? We don't have a lot of track record in how to manage something of this, substantial impact on the whole of our civilization, our species, our planet. So that's my little two bits on that.
Thank you.
Katrina?
Yeah, I just want to, before I ask my question, maybe just pick up on what Jane was saying and offer a very practical tip for this group. So when I came into the meeting, I noticed there were about 3 AI note taker bots. I think I still see one in the group. It looks like the others may have dropped off. That's not necessary. So, Randall, if you, as the meeting organizer, were to say to everyone, hey, you don't need to send your meeting note taker bot. I'm going to take notes with my Otter, whatever. I'm going to send those out to everyone who registered. So then we don't need 4 bot takers here bumping up all the compute. And that's a very practical thing that we could do to get at some of what we're talking about in terms of using it wisely. So I just wanted to kind of offer that tip. My question for David, so the reason I showed up is because it was AI and David, and I'm like, I really want to hear what David has to say about this. And then you told me how, I went to Claude and blah, blah, blah. And I guess my question is, to what degree, what would David have said without using that tool? To what degree does that, reflect what you actually wound up saying because you had that tool structuring your thinking in some way? And maybe just kind of step that out to the bigger picture. And what are your thoughts on that? It's a little bit more of a philosophical type question, but I'm just wondering about that. How does this tool structure our thinking or structure what we actually do? And what are your thoughts on what happened today?
Okay, so that's yes, that's a really good question. So before I turned to Claude to give me a hand getting this organized, I spent some time sitting around and thinking, okay, what am I going to talk about? And I was thinking about how do I sequence it? What makes sense? What kinds of things should I talk about? And then I thought about, okay, well, I guess I should start making a list of these things, and started, typing up some bullet points. And then I thought to myself, I'm not really doing anything that's particularly groundbreaking. And I'm not really doing anything that requires a lot of creativity or deep personal human insight here, right? Because this is a fairly high level, generic kind of topic. And so I thought, well, you know, uh, you know, the ability of the LLM to provide structure and to put into words the things that I'm thinking are very good, right? And I read through everything that it output, and I didn't find anything that was disagreeable to me. And I did modify a few things to add in a bit more, detail, or, it had some things in there that I thought this is not relevant at all. Um, so so because I have some knowledge and some expertise in this area, right? There's nothing that I said today that I couldn't have said or wouldn't have said if I hadn't have used a tool to help structure this and come up with these slides, right? There's no information or knowledge that I just downloaded into my brain from the LLM. It was stuff that was already there. Okay, so I don't think of it as cheating from an academic perspective, because I already knew all this stuff, and I've already said all of the things that I've said today. I've already said them before. I'm already aware of them.
Yeah, I'm almost more curious about the opposite, like what you would have said. So it's sort of like, okay, you know a bunch of stuff, and obviously you're an expert in this area, and this thing
I'm an
tells you,
expert.
David, talk about this, and that, and you look at it. But if you had started from a different place, would it have been like, hey, really want to share this kind of cool, maybe arcane, maybe not the middle of the road fact about this thing, or maybe, I don't know, some other story. That's the part I'm wondering about. Like, does it just kind of, yeah, it does a good, mediocre kind of a job, and it's serviceable, and it's good at structuring, and it's really good at the marketing copy. I just used it for a different thing that I'm going to be involved with in a month or so. But I
Yeah.
also wonder about, like, what is it like, when you start from one place and you become the reviewer, it's a different process often. And maybe it doesn't matter so much for this particular example, but I'm also thinking stepped out writ large, what does that do to us? So that's kind of, where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So the deciding to kind of peel back the curtain and reveal, what the steps were that I went through to arrive at this presentation. I thought that was some bit of human insight or ingenuity on my part. It didn't make that suggestion. I thought that it would be a novel to do that. Yeah, no, the the ramifications of what you've pondered, I worry about more for people that do not currently have the knowledge to be able to, responsibly, accept the suggestions or input or structure being suggested by the LLM. Right? That because I already know these things, I can recognize what I think is a weak argument or a solid one, or confusing or not confusing. Like I can judge those things, right? But if I were, wanting to put together a presentation on, how to properly gap the spark plugs in your lawnmower, right? I would have no basis for deciding whether what it was suggesting was nonsense or not. Okay, or was what was already common knowledge to the people that I was going to be presenting this to. Right. And that's the danger, is that you sound just as confident and just as polished, if you're talking about something you know something about or not, if you're just reading off what the LLM gives you.
Can I add a little bit on that myself?
I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, but building on that, because people have talked about the propensity for intellectual laziness, and I have to say I have struggled with this myself using AI for hours every day, struggling with questions that I have. But it's very difficult to quantify. With Katrina's question about, see, I make presentations as well, but depending on the day or the week or the mood I'm in, I'm going to get a different result anyway. Even if I did it from scratch on my own, if I use AI, there's countless different ways in which we can present this information, any of which would be sufficient. We don't have good metrics for deciding, how much loss we're incurring in our cognitive capacities. I know there's a learning curve. This is another point, that there's a learning curve. The more you use it, possibly the better you get at it. And the AI that you use regularly gets to know you and your interests and expectations. I've One tip I would offer is that if you want to check the output from one large language model, put it into a different one and ask it to assess this, with fact checking, or for whatever criteria you want to apply in that assessment. I don't know, David, do you have any comments on this?
I was just going to, just something else to respond to Katrina. One of the other things I wanted to do was I wanted to demonstrate how easy this is, and how and from a quality perspective, how good a job it does. That the amount of input I provided it was very little. Okay, I didn't have to spend a lot of time explaining things to it. Right, I gave it relatively simple prompts, and I just wanted to demonstrate for people that maybe aren't as familiar with using these tools how, in half an hour, you can come up with something that seems reasonably competent, right? And so whatever is your knowledge area. So for example, Jane, you know things about, counseling and relationships and all that kind of stuff, right? And you could say to it, hey, I'm doing a 6-hour workshop, or I'm doing a 3-day retreat. And it's going to be amongst, couples that are in their 50s that, have adult children that they're, have difficult relationships with. Give me some suggestions on what we could do. And it could come back with a schedule of, Saturday morning, lunch, afternoon, whatever. You might find it, only half useful, but at least it would give you something to start from. It would give you a document that's got all the that's got some styles and some templates and stuff that you can then go in and rearrange if you don't, or you can say to it, hey, you know what? I don't like the thing you proposed for Sunday. I want to move that to Monday. Right. And so you could get something, and you could then say, hey, you know what? Here's some things that I've written about this subject. I want you to try to incorporate that into this in some way.
Very good. Now, are there any other questions? Anyone? Angela had mentioned a retail company that she's working with, and it occurred to me as you're talking, David, about inventory management. I assume you're still going to have a database for inventory management, but is there a way AI could help in that particular?
Oh, absolutely. So the vibe coding tools that are currently available can very, very easily make you a relatively simple, straightforward application. You could say, I'm a small business, I have these kinds of products, I have them in this kind of quantities. Here's what I sell, here's how I sell them, here's how I receive orders. I'd like you to build me a database that lets me track these things. Okay, and I receive inventory and blah, blah, blah. And you could have it create for you a halfway reasonable, competent kind of application, right? In a couple of hours. Now, getting it to maybe handle more complicated things like product returns or in-store credits or that kind of stuff is going to require a bit more finesse. And it also requires that, I think it helps to be someone who has some experience with how computer programming works, to be able to explain to the vibe coding machine what you want or how you want it or how you want something different. But I see that as one of the big revolutions that's to come, is that the people that are the experts in how their business works or how their processes work, instead of needing to communicate that to someone else to then communicate it to the programmers to then implement the code, that they can just build for themselves a system that does most of what they need, or does it in the way that they want, or presents the information to them in the way that they need, and then turn it over to developers to make it scale, make it secure, make it integrate with other things. And so that's something that I'm really exploring with my business, is doing that, is creating those, vibe coded proof of concept, beta versions of things. And also depending on the scale, it could be entirely appropriate for use for your entire business. I can imagine someone like Jane, having a vibe coded app where she can have information about her clients and all her resources, and be able to provide customized resources for her clients to be able to access securely, without having to, worry about all these different systems and integrating. And she'd have credit card payments and all that stuff in there.
So, Angela, is that helpful for you?
Thanks for the question, Randall. I would not have thought of it, but I have thought about creating inventory management systems. So I will have to explore vibe coding. I've heard of it, but I've never actually looked at it. So that's interesting. I was thinking more when we think of these AI tools, these generative AI tools, I'm mostly thinking of writing stuff, like writing a grant application or writing marketing material. I'm not really thinking in terms of coding something. So that is a really valuable tip. Thank you.
Angela, I'd be more than happy to have a vibe coding session with you online or in person.
Okay.
And, we can talk about, and I can sort of get something set up and show you how easy it is.
How it works. Okay. Thank you. I can reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
We're making good progress here and winding up to the end of the hour. Are there any other questions from anyone? Well, if not, I guess I will just thank you, David, for this
welcome.
very wealth of information and your insights into what I guess at this point there are no complete answers, because we're dealing with something that is evolving and developing day by day, and not to mention all the corporate things that are going on in the background. We don't know where this is going, and the politics, as rightly noted. So I guess we can look forward to reviewing this video once again, once it's edited and posted on our Wayfinders Business Cooperative YouTube channel. Any word, last word, David?
No, thank you very much for coming, and I hope I didn't just kind of go too fast and do too many things at once.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It was excellent.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you for joining us for this session of Finding Your Way. We hope today's conversation has given you practical insights you can apply right away. If you'd like to learn more about Wayfinders Business Cooperative, connect with our community, explore membership, you'll find our contact information on the screen. You'll also find contact details for our guest if you'd like to follow up directly. Please consider sharing this video with a colleague who may benefit, and subscribe to our channel for future sessions. Until next time, keep finding your way.